Hi guys, it's Bryony. Welcome back to my channel. So I have now been a mum for 1 year and I thought it'd be really fun to do a Q&A and get you guys to ask me your questions about what it's been like in my first year as a solo mum by choice. So I put the questions out on my Instagram account earlier and I had loads of really good responses. I mean, I always get a good number of questions from you guys and some really interesting questions, but this particular time that I put this request out, I got some amazing questions. So I've actually picked out 8 to go through, and I think it might take me a little while to get through them all, so I'm going to jump right on in and start by answering question number 1. What is the thing you have enjoyed most about solo parenting? Oh, there are so many things that I really love about being a solo parent. I talked a little bit about some of them in my asexual parenting video that I did. But I think one of the things that I personally really like about solo parenting is being able to make all of the decisions. It's not been quite so critical this first year, I think, because in the UK we have 9 months paid maternity leave, and then you can, if you're employed, you can take an extra 3 months unpaid off as well. So a lot of my mum friends have had like a full year off, and because that first year, if you're on maternity leave, you are the one with your baby the most. Generally, I think we as women do tend to make the most decisions in that time, so I'm not sure it's quite as critical as it might be a little bit further down the line in a couple of years' time. But I have still enjoyed being able to be the one to make all the decisions around things like weaning style, breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, not having any pressure from like any other side to do something I didn't want, or, you know, just there's loads of different little things about it, but I just generally have enjoyed having him to myself and being able to kind of navigate things how I want to in this first year. Question number 2. What is something you thought would be a big challenge but was actually easier than you thought? This is a hard one because I'm not sure if I had any idea of what would be a big challenge. Oh, I guess the thing that I thought would be the biggest challenge was recovering from my C-section, and that was way easier than I thought it was going to be. I had planned to stay with my parents for the first 6 weeks because that's how long I've been told it took to recover from a C-section, but actually I felt pretty good by like 2 weeks post C-section. I still stayed with my parents for that full 6 weeks, and it was really helpful to have their support and for me to be able to just focus on, you know, breastfeeding Orin and, you know, doing the night feeds, and they just focused on like making sure they washed my clothes and they cooked meals for me, and it was just amazing to have such a great support network around me. But in terms of like the actual recovery, I felt good by like a week after my C-section, but I felt really good by 2 weeks after it. So I had thought that I literally was going to be in pain for those 6 weeks, and it was going to be a full 6 weeks recovery. But actually, like, the first week was the most intense recovery, and then after that, like, I felt much better, and it was sort of smaller internal recoveries that I didn't necessarily feel as much. So that was definitely something I thought was going to be more difficult than it actually ended up being. Question number 3. What has surprised you most in your first year of motherhood? Honestly, I think the thing that has surprised me most is just how much I have enjoyed this first year. I always knew I really wanted to have kids, and I knew that I'd love them when I did have them, but you hear so much about how difficult the first year of parenting can truly be, and things like postnatal depression, anxiety, you know, sleep deprivation, all sorts of stuff. Like, there's so many things that can make this first year really, really challenging. And yeah, like, some of it I dealt with, like, obviously the newborn days, I don't sleep very much, and, you know, we had issues with breastfeeding and other things. But overall, this first year has been amazing, and without question has been the best year of my life. And I just didn't expect that. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. I thought I would like it, but I didn't realise I would love it. So that's been a really nice surprise. Question number 4. What has been the most challenging part of solo motherhood since Orin's birth? I think on the whole, I've actually been really lucky that this year has not been too challenging. But if I had to pick the most challenging aspect, it would definitely be having to work out that he had an allergy. So the early days with my breastfeeding journey, with feeding him, even though like actually breastfeeding itself was never been difficult, it was never really painful, his latch was always good, he fed regularly, he slept reasonably well for a newborn. But the fact that he wasn't gaining weight, and we couldn't figure out why, because I was pumping milk and topping him up, and like he wouldn't gain enough weight, and we just couldn't work out what it was. And then it got to a point where it was actually really quite serious. That was definitely the biggest challenge, was trying to navigate that and figure out what to do. And also because I became unexpectedly attached to the idea of exclusively breastfeeding. Before I had him, I was very much in the mindset of, I'm going to try breastfeeding, and if it doesn't work, I'll go into formula. But I didn't really think about actually, like, I might be able to breastfeed some of the time, but he still might need formula top-ups. That had just never crossed my mind before, that combi feeding might be needed. So I kind of wish I had been a little bit more open-minded about that in the early days, because now, looking back at it from, like, you know, a year on, it wasn't that big of a deal that he was combi fed. You know, he is still breastfed and he has been for the last year, but he also needed some formula top-ups too, and he's been a strong, healthy baby because of that. But I just, like, I couldn't switch my brain onto that for quite a while, and that's something I do kind of regret. And it was definitely the most challenging part, was that mental shift into, actually we need to do something now, and also accepting that he probably did have an allergy, and then negotiating like weaning with that and everything. So yeah, I'd say that was probably the most challenging thing I've dealt with this year. Question number 5. How has your mental health been since Orin was born? So just in case you're new here, I had really severe mental health problems during my pregnancy. I had antenatal depression, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, a little bit of psychosis at one point as well, like quite significant mental health issues. But I was very lucky that literally within like 2 hours of Orin being born, they just evaporated. They went away almost immediately. And actually, since he was born, I haven't had any sort of depression or anxiety, which I am so lucky that happened to me, because it can often be the case that if you have antenatal depression and anxiety, it does continue postnatally too. The only slight wobble I had is because my mental health was so bad in my pregnancy, I was fortunate enough that I was able to kind of get a lot more support afterwards too. They kind of automatically rolled me over into that. So when Orin was 5 weeks old, I started a mother and baby wellness group, and that was a 10-week course. And I started the course when he was 5 weeks old, and honestly at that point I felt fantastic. So I was sitting there feeling a bit like a fraud in this kind of session where people are sharing the challenges that they're having post-baby and how they're feeling low, and I'm like, I actually feel really good. I'm not sure I should be here. But as the weeks progressed, I think when Orin was like, so it was a 10-week course, but they didn't happen every 10 weeks because there were half terms and stuff in there too. But I think it finished when Orin was around 18 weeks old. And at that point, I was starting to struggle a little bit, because by that time he was 4 months old, and he was starting to become more interactive. You know, he'd smile at me, he'd play with me a bit more, and that's where I would have these moments that I was looking at him and be like, oh my goodness, I love you so much, I can't believe I grew you, you're an incredible human. And then my brain would just suddenly be like, hi, yeah, you wanted to kill him when you were pregnant, just want to remind you of that. And that was a really horrible thing to go through, because, you know, I did have those sorts of thoughts in my pregnancy, and I didn't understand why they were happening to me in pregnancy. And I did a whole video on like why my pregnancy was really difficult. You can go back and find that on my channel if you want to. But I noticed that as he was getting bigger, those sort of feelings of like guilt and shame about my experiences in pregnancy, even though I'd had no control over that, was starting to seep back in a bit. So I mentioned that to the therapist who'd taken the session, and she agreed that I should probably have some one-to-one support after those sessions finished, just to help me work through that. And the really annoying thing is that I probably would have been fine with just like regular counselling, but my local authority doesn't offer that as one of their services, so she had to kind of like fit me into a category. And after talking to me, she said that she felt like I would benefit from doing the PTSD kind of workshop training stuff that she did, and so my one-to-one sessions were around that, and it was actually really helpful. And it was a way to kind of like talk through everything that had happened. We basically started from like the first time I found out I was pregnant right through my whole pregnancy, week by week. It took a good like 3 or 4 weeks just to get through all of that, because so much happened. And by the end of it, I felt so much better, and it was just like I've been able to process what had happened to me, and it made a big difference to me, because that doesn't happen anymore, which is just such a relief to know. And part of the reason I did tell her when it started happening was because I didn't want it to be something that kind of got worse over time, like snowballed and got worse, and then I needed even more intensive treatment. I felt like in my pregnancy, if I'd actually had some proper intervention a bit earlier, I might not have got as sick as I did. So I was really careful postnatally to be like, yeah, actually I think I need some support here. And so I had those sessions with her, and then even after those 4 sessions that one-to-one sessions she did were over, she then did like a monthly check-in. So I kind of very gradually stepped down my care. So I started with like, I had a psychiatrist that I saw, and then she was able to sign me off the books. That was great. Then I was just seeing my therapist, and then she was just doing a monthly check-in. But I haven't had any mental health support since Orin was 8 months old now, I think. And I've been absolutely fine. So that was such a relief, and I hope also helpful and hopeful to those of you out there who have maybe had a really difficult pregnancy to know it doesn't always continue on post-birth. Question number 6. What is the best thing about being a solo parent in your experience? I guess this is kind of similar to the first question that I was asked, but I think for me personally, the best thing about solo parenthood itself has been the amazing community that I have met through doing this. I have made so many friends, like so many friends this last year. It's just been wonderful. Orin and I always have someone we can meet. And some of the other solo mums that I've met, we come from all different walks of life. We have had different paths into motherhood. We've gone through this route different ways, some through IVF, some through IUI, some through embryo donation, some have used egg donation. Like there's so many different ways that people have come to this point, and we just so happen to have our babies around the same time. But it's been a truly lovely experience getting to know them, and that has without question been the best thing about solo parenthood for me so far. I think it's going to be interesting though to see what happens with those relationships throughout these next couple of years, because obviously this first year majority of us have been on maternity leave or like just easing into work recently, and I think as more and more of us have gone back to work and are going back to work, we're not going to see each other nearly as much as we were this past year. So it'll be interesting to see how those relationships change and develop, I think, over the coming years now. Question number 7. What was the most useful thing you did to prepare practically? Well, because I was a foster carer before I had Orin, I already had a lot of stuff. So I didn't really need to buy very much before he was born, because I already had like a bassinet, a Moses basket, some newborn baby clothes. I think I bought a couple of extra bits. But really, like, there's so little you need for a newborn, and as the year goes on and they get bigger and you need more things, you just kind of buy them as and when you need them. So it's kind of hard to know what I did to prepare practically, because some of that stuff I just happened to have, and it wasn't the same as if I'd never had children and then like needed to buy everything. But I think the most important thing I did to prepare for solo motherhood was to talk to my parents about what support they could offer, because I knew that personally I would find it incredibly difficult to go down this path without them supporting me. And so basically talking to them beforehand about like how much support they could offer, would they be able to help me out with childcare at all, and them saying like how much they were able to help me was really, really useful, and definitely the best thing that I did in terms of actual like preparedness. I don't think it's not like a physical thing where I bought a certain product to prepare, but actually like setting up your support network around you is so vital that I think making sure that's in place is the most important thing that I did. It's also a major reason why this first year has been as amazing as it has been. And finally, question number 8. At what point would you consider a second child? So in my pregnancy, I swore I was never doing that again. But since Orin has been born, I'm like craving a second baby. Mother Nature is wild. So first of all, yes, I do plan to try for a second child at some point. Now, it's currently my plan is to try for a second child as long as nothing dramatic happens this year. I don't have a set like time or date where I'm going to start trying for that second child. I do know it's not going to be anytime soon though. I am not doing 2 under 2. Been there, done that with fostering. No, thank you. I do want a little bit of an age gap between them, so it's definitely not going to be anytime soon. And I think it probably won't be this year either, so don't hold your breath for any announcements coming soon. But I have at least got to a place where I am pretty confident that I do want to try for a second child. And at some point I will need to go and have some tests done just to check like what my uterus looks like now, and you know, my follicles still look good and everything. Hopefully it should be fine. If I started trying in say like a year from now, I'll be 27, so hopefully things should still be okay at that point. But I would like to get checked out before that, just to be kind of like reasonably confident that things have gone back where they should post baby. So yeah, that is my 1 year post baby Q&A. Honestly, time has just absolutely flown past, but it has been a truly amazing year, and I'm so pleased and so thrilled that I've been able to share part of this journey with you guys too. Here's hoping that the second year of solo motherhood is just as good as the first. Thank you as always for watching, and of course a special thank you to my Precious Star Superstar members who are members of my channel. You can click on the link to join here if you want to see some of the little benefits that you get, and it just really helps to support me in making more content and not having to worry about the algorithm quite so much. Thank you so much for watching guys. Do please subscribe, and I will see you next week. Bye everyone, have a great day.